Horrific screams dart across the walls of neighboring buildings. Faces of horror and complete devastation stand frozen as they look onto the ruins. The entire country erupts in fits of hysteric tears and wide, bewildered eyes. Bloody, burned bodies scatter the streets. The pure look of terror forever will remain on their faces. Innocent mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, daughters, and sons, each loved by someone, each deprived of an unknown life. Years later, the deep concavities of resentment and despair that rests in the minds and hearts of Americans are larger than the empty lots of the once beautiful Twin Towers. Immediately after this life-altering attack, Americans began looking for the person who had created so much of their sorrow, a person to pay for the thousands of lives they destroyed. Without the discovery of who was behind this heinous attack, Americans would have never had the closure many of them needed. Outraged and afraid, they were willing to do whatever necessary to find this terrorist. They were even willing to torture suspects until they gave up the location of the mastermind behind the attack. This arose the question, is torture ethical? Although you may never be strapped to a chair and tortured for information, as a parent, the choice must be made whether or not to spank your kids. This, although less extreme, is a form of torture. The definition of torture is the action or practice of inflicting severe pain on someone as a punishment or to force them to do or say something, or for the pleasure of the person inflicting the pain. Therefore, most forms of inflicted pain is and can be considered torture. Some say torture is inhumane, unnecessary, and utterly immoral. However, physical and mental torture can induce fear, which in turn establishes control and can enrich and save lives. Torture is the fastest and most effective method to extract useful information, achieve what one desires, or punish for a crime. According to Crothamar of the New York Times, 80% of countries other than the U.S. use torture as their main method of gaining information. These countries have never questioned the morality of this act. They do what they have to get the results, no matter the ethics. In 1994, Israeli Corporal Nahashon Waxman was kidnapped by Palestinian terrorists. His life was saved because the civil force captured and tortured the driver of the terrorist's car in order to obtain his location and then rescued him. ISIS is a militant group by Sharia law. They are a terrorist group who are well known for the kidnapping, torture, and killing of American journalists in order to prove that they should not be irritated. They are bent on creating a Sunni Islamic State through the use of extreme violence against its perceived enemies. They already have large portions of Iraq under control, and it has not taken them as long as it potentially would have if they had used peaceful tactics. By strategically executing people they knew, it would leave a major impact on the people around the world, which is exactly what they want. The world despises ISIS because of the way they go about achieving their goal. However, their methods are effective for their purpose. Torture creates control. Queen Mary of England randomly burned people to strike fear into the hearts of the citizens. The townspeople respected her and were willing to do anything she asked of them. She created the control she needed. Parents also have the choice to use torture to create respect. Spanking is a common form of torture used by 61% of adults in America as regular punishment. Parents all around the world spank their children in an effort to create respect, to teach their young that to every decision there's a consequence, and to bring up respectful, accountable, self-controlled, strong youth. Spanking relates a wrongdoing to a painful experience, which deters the child from repeating this action. In a different country down the south coast, torture is much more severe than spanking. 60% of people in Brazil do not feel safe from torture. Therefore, this fear creates respect, says Swanson from the Huffington Post. When people fully comprehend the severity of their consequence, they tend to steer clear of it. If criminals were not aware that there was a punishment for their crimes, they would not be afraid to commit them, and crime rates would skyrocket. When one is in pain, personally connected, afraid, or caused any type of mental discomfort, they will do anything in their power to uproot the source of discomfort, even if it is unethical or illegal. After the U.S. horrifically tortured the enemy prisoners during World War II, in 1948 the U.S. prohibited any kind of act committed by a person acting under the color of law, intended to inflict severe physical or mental pain or suffering upon another person within his custody or physical control. However, there have been 4 major accounts of torture several years after the law was first instituted. 9/11 caused an uproar in America, and immediately they looked for a person to blame for their loss. Through methods of torture such as waterboarding, starvation, physical assault, and exploitation of phobias, they were finally able to find Osama bin Laden. However, the CIA did not tell anyone about their illegal operations, and when they were exposed, 13 years later, 59% of Americans justified it, even though it was illegal. Whether or not it is legal, the law will not be followed. The CIA secretly used torture then. Could they still be using it now? Before the ban on torture was put in place, detectives in the U.S. used the 3 degrees method, in which they used persuasion, fear, and pain in order to obtain information. Thomas Burns, an influential and extraordinary detective in New York from 1880 to 1895, was the founder of the 3 degrees method, and his ways were clearly effective because of the whopping 3,300 crimes solved. However, now that this method has been banned, the number of unsolved murders in New York has increased. A former prison guard said, "If you don't violate someone's rights some of the time, you probably aren't doing your job." Torture hurts one person but can save the lives of many. These are 2 scenarios, which are highly likely, in which torture would be beneficial. A mother is walking through the crowded streets of the city with her little girl walking behind her. She turns around just as 4 men snatch her dear child and put her in the back of their car. In a panicked fury, she darts towards them, screaming, "Stop! Help! Stop those men!" An innocent bystander responds to her cry and punches one of the men. The other 3 and the child speed away. The police investigate the men but did not receive any information. He is released because he seems to be innocent and unaware of the plan of the other 3 men. The terror-stricken mother follows the man home, where she bursts into his home, ties him up, and holds a gun to his head. After only a few short minutes, the man reveals the location of the girl. The girl was saved. Because of the mother's stress and fear, she was able to save her beloved daughter. When a person is in distress, they will do anything to get what they want, no matter the consequence, just as a mother resorted to torture in order to get back what she loved, her precious daughter. If 2 men were to put a bomb somewhere in New York City and 1 man was caught, shouldn't America do everything in its power to save all those innocent people? The CIA would have had a limited amount of time and resources before the bomb detonated. Therefore, torturing the man who was caught would be a fast and effective way to obtain the needed information to save thousands of citizens. These 2 situations express the hypothetical necessity for torture if an extreme situation were to arise. Situations such as these have presented themselves before in other countries and will present itself to America in due time. Then we will be forced to make the decision between torture of 1 man or the lives of multiple. On the other hand, 62% of people believe torture can not be justified because of the negative effects. Not only does torture mess with one physically, but it can destroy someone's mental stability as well. In fact, most examples of tortures have long-term effects. Cuts improve, bones heal, however, the effects of mental abuse never cease to exist. A person who is tortured will never return to the same person they were. Torture destroys lives. Past presidents such as Washington, Jefferson, and Adams all supported fair, decent treatment of all enemies. Using torture makes America seem weak and look bad. Torture is inhumane, degrading, and unfair. Often, multiple people are wrongly accused as they search for the real criminal. During the 9/11 interrogation, 24 lives were ruined before they even found someone who had any useful information. This also brings up another flaw. Torture teaches people how to not get caught and how to lie. Children often lie in order to get out of a punishment or to help out their friend. However, adults use the same concept. They will say anything for the pain to stop, even if it is untrue. Legal methods are more accurate and successful. These specific forms of torture are cruel. However, there are several very effective forms of torture which have lesser effects, such as silence, music, controlled dreams, deprivation of something they love, or truth serums. Each of these are considered a form of torture, yet can be very effective with few negative effects. Torture was legal in the U.S. for hundreds of successful years and can again help strengthen the U.S. by creating the necessary fear to obtain control and to better the lives of American citizens by keeping them safe.